Listen, y'all, it was certainly a great weekend. You had Tyler Herro win the three-point contest. It was an overall awesome weekend for him, and I'm very happy for him about that. He also gave some interesting quotes saying how this Heat team now has clarity.
We have clarity now. We got a lot of clarity.
And while I agree with him on that, they're also in the midst of a 4-game losing streak since trading Jimmy Butler, and they're at a season worst 3 games under 500. Now, there is a lot of reasons for that. Of course, we've talked about Terry Rozier at length on this channel, but I'm not putting all the blame on him because I don't think you can attribute all the blame on one person, except for maybe Erik Spoelstra, as I'm being told, because I love Erik Spoelstra, but clearly a lot of you watching this video don't. And I mean a lot of you, because my comments have been flooded with criticism of Erik Spoelstra. And I agree. Although I love Erik Spoelstra, I can admit that he's having a horrible season. Because on this channel, I consider myself a realist. I have to tell it like it is. And right now, Erik Spoelstra has been terrible this season. Now, I do want to clarify, that doesn't mean I think he should be fired. He's built up enough credit for me. He's won multiple championships, and he's really been through everything that you could possibly go through. He's had teams with a bunch of undrafted players. He's had a super team. He's won championships, lost championships. He's had disgruntled stars. He's had everything. And I think that experience is really invaluable, particularly in the postseason when we see him consistently outcoach other coaches. And for that reason, I would never fire Erik Spoelstra, although he does need to get his act together. And I know how it feels because I'm a Dolphins fan right now. And in my 26 years of living, I've seen like 20 coaches, and it's ridiculous. So when you find... Yo, what's going on, y'all? I'm just here to tell y'all to like the video and subscribe because it does help me out a lot, and I greatly appreciate it. Peace out. Pinpointed 4 things that I think Erik Spoelstra needs to fix this season. Now, we'll start with the smaller stuff and then kind of work our way up. So the first thing I want to talk about is all of the blown leads this season. And the reason I'm discussing this first is because that's not entirely on Spoelstra, just because he's not out there missing shots or playing bad defense or not getting rebounds. But what we can blame him for is his reluctance to call timeouts when the other team's on a run, his inability to draw up easy plays when you're scoring single-digit points in the fourth quarter, and also the lineups that he's putting out there, particularly late in the games, have not been good either. Now, this season, the Heat have blown 13 double-digit leads, which is actually the second most in the NBA, and we could really make a 3-hour video discussing all of them. But I want to talk about the most recent one, which was against the Oklahoma City Thunder, in which the Heat went up into that fourth quarter up. Well, I think they were up. What were they up? They were up 10. And then Spoelstra waited until OKC took the lead to call a timeout. You can see here on this play-by-play, it started with Lu Dort hitting a 3-pointer, then Tyler Herro had a turnover, and then Shai Gilgeous hit a 3 to make it a 4-point game. At this point is when I would have called a timeout, kind of slowed down the momentum of the other team, get the crowd out of it a little bit, because we've seen this movie before. I've played these games before, is what Erik Spoelstra should have been thinking. But no, instead he lets the play keep running, and then you have a turnover by Jovic. Jovic fouls the other team. Shai has a wide-ass open dunk cutting to the rim, and then Alec Burks has a turnover. Dort hits a layup. Burks hits a 3. Shai hits another 3. And just like that, within less than 3 minutes, the Heat's 10-point lead was completely evaporated in the fourth quarter. And that, to me, is inexcusable. Waiting that long to call a timeout in that environment was just poor coaching by Erik Spoelstra. Now, he doesn't always wait too long. I do want to give him some credits in this game, which who can forget maybe the worst blown lead of the season, when the Heat blew a 22-point fourth quarter lead to the Orlando Magic. Yes, the Heat were up 22, and the Magic didn't have Franz. They didn't have Paolo. That is truly a loss that I wake up with a cold sweat in the middle of the night sometimes. How do you blow a 22-point fourth quarter lead? Well, let's look at how it started. It started with a Cole Anthony tip dunk, and then you had a Duncan Robinson turnover, and then you had a Cole Anthony hook shot, and then you had a Jaime Jaquez Jr. turnover, and then you had a Jett Howard 3. But what I want to note is that Spoelstra did immediately call timeout. He called timeout about a minute and a half into the fourth quarter. So sometimes he does use the timeouts appropriately. Now, I guess not when challenging. He almost never challenges. Like, does he think that you can carry over challenges and take them to the next game? Sometimes you might as well use them, Spoelstra. And he doesn't have a very good record when challenging. Kind of like Mike McDaniel, too, speaking of the Dolphins coach that we were doing earlier. But in this case, Erik Spoelstra did call his timeouts early, a minute and a half into the quarter. Obviously, it didn't change much because the Magic still went on a giant run. But the part that is frustrating about this is it seems like Erik Spoelstra couldn't draw up a single play to get an easy bucket after that. This is the game I think the Heat scored like 8 points in the fourth quarter. Yeah, they got outscored 37-8 in the fourth quarter. That's a real box score to an Orlando Magic team that was missing all their best players. And you couldn't draw up a single play? You couldn't draw up anything to get a Kel'el Ware pick and roll? It seems like he never draws up easy plays late in these fourth quarters, which is why there has been 3 single-digit scoring quarters by the Heat this season. There's only been 4 single-digit scoring fourth quarters in the entire NBA. The Heat have 3 of them. 3 of them. And that's with the current All-Star in Tyler Hero. That's with a perennial All-Star in Bam Adebayo. That's just inexcusable. That really, really is. But that being said, that's not entirely on Erik Spoelstra because a lot of guys out there are just looking like they forget how to play basketball. And I guess you could say it's because they're poorly coached, but I don't know. I truthfully, I still can't explain the blown leads because it literally looks like they forgot how to dribble. They forgot not to do cross-court passes that get intercepted. They forgot how to make a layup. You can't blame Erik Spoelstra for all of that. Now, you can't blame him for the lineups that he puts in there, but we'll kind of get into that because that point kind of relates to everything we're going to discuss in this video, including the next point, which is Erik Spoelstra's hesitancy to play Bam Adebayo and Kel'el Ware together. That's kind of my second biggest, or I guess my second smallest gripe because we're working our way up. But my second smallest problem with Erik Spoelstra this year, which is obviously still a very big one, because Kel'el Ware and Bam Adebayo didn't actually get real minutes together until January 19th, a few months into the season. I was actually at that game versus San Antonio Spurs. The Heat were down 10 early, and that's when the Heat were in the midst of getting blown out every single game with all the Jimmy Butler stuff going on, because that was actually Jimmy's last win in a Heat jersey. And the fact that I was there was pretty cool, but also pretty sad to look back on. But anyways, I remember being at the game being like, damn, I spent my hard-earned money to see the Heat get their ass kicked again because they were down 10 in like the first quarter. And then checking into the game, I see Bam Adebayo and Kel'el Ware. And I said, do my eyes deceive me, or has Erik Spoelstra finally done something that the fans have been asking for forever? And I'm not here to say the fans know more than Erik Spoelstra because Erik's in the locker room. He's in the practice sessions. He's not an idiot. But sure enough, when he finally does the thing that all the fans have been asking for, the Heat went on a giant run, and the Heat ended up being up by like 20 in that game, and they really, really turned the game around. And that's pretty much when he started playing Kel'el Ware consistently over 20 minutes. He had some spot minutes, a handful of games throughout the season previously, but that's when he really started playing 20 minutes every night minimum in the rotation. And I think he started every game since then. But it should have happened a lot earlier. It really should have happened because there has been countless games that the Heat have blown this year because they either couldn't get rebounds late in games, they were just getting out rebounded all game, they were getting cooked by average centers in the league just because they were bigger than the Miami Heat. You had Haywood Highsmith, who's like 6'5" on a good day, playing power forward, and you just can't win games like that. And seriously, there has been so many times this year where late in the games, they couldn't get a stop, couldn't get a rebound, or they gave up 20 offensive rebounds previously in the game to even put the Heat in a position where a game that should not have been close was close, and then the Heat end up losing because they're just way too small. There's this one play in particular where we know when the Heat went to Sacramento, they blew a 17-point fourth quarter lead. But do you remember the game when Sacramento was in Miami? You had the Heat here up 1 with 6 seconds left. You had De'Aaron Fox driving in on Pelle Larsson, and the Heat actually get the stop, but who's there to get the rebound? It's Domantas Sabonis, who puts in the putback with 0.7 seconds left, and the Kings were able to steal a win from the Miami Heat. And when you look at this play here, Sabonis grabs this offensive rebound, and a sea of Pelle Larsson, 6'6" Pelle Larsson, and 6'1" Terry Rozier. And to go back to the lineup thing, which we'll just talk about throughout this video, this is the final defensive possession of the game. And look who Erik Spoelstra has out there. He's got Jimmy Butler, obviously. He's got Bam Adebayo, obviously. But then he has Tyler Hero, Pelle Larsson, and then Terry Rozier. Why? If you want to keep Tyler out there, fine. They miss a shot. You want to have better foul shooters out there, fine. You want to have Pelle, who has decent size and athleticism, although he's got cooked by a ton of people this year. Okay, I don't know, maybe. But there's no excuse to have Terry Rozier out there. What? How many times this year has Spoelstra closed a defensive possession in a game with Terry Rozier? That makes no sense. Terry Rozier's a turnstile. And that's why we have been blaming Terry a lot this year. But you can also go up one step and blame Erik Spoelstra, because Terry should not have been in there in the first place when you have a guy like Haywood Highsmith. I see Drew Smith still out there on the bench. That should not happen ever. And this is a big reason why they've blown so many leads this year. It's because of the lineups they had in there late, and a lot of that is because you didn't have Kel'el Ware in there just to kind of drive the point together. And then you see what happens when Kel'el Ware comes in. He's dropping 20 points. He's hitting threes. He's blocking shots. He's getting rebounds. Now, Kel'el Ware still has a long way to go. Sometimes he looks lost out there. And I know people were saying, oh, Kel'el Ware might have not worked earlier. That's why Spo put him in when he was ready. And that's a BS excuse. Because what we do know, what is a fact, is before Kel'el Ware was playing, the Heat were getting killed on the offensive rebounds. Killed inside. Just killed in general. They weren't playing good basketball. So bringing in Kel'el Ware can't hurt. The definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And that's what Erik Spoelstra was doing for the first 3 months of this season. He was rolling out these small lineups, the same ones we saw for the previous years, and thinking that it was going to work for the Heat, and it hasn't. And then he brought in Kel'el Ware, and I know they're under 500 now, but those minutes with him and Bam have actually been really, really good defensively, and they're improving offensively as well, although that end is a little bit consistent. I don't think the offensive stuff is necessarily Ware's fault. I wish they would actually look for Ware more offensively. That's another thing on Erik Spoelstra that I think he needs to improve on, is even a game against the Mavericks. You had no Derek Lively, you had no Daniel Gafford. The starting center on the Mavericks was like 6'7", and Kel'el Ware had 15 first half points and 2 points in the second half. That to me is not on Ware. They didn't draw no pick and rolls for Kel'el Ware. They didn't draw any plays to get Kel'el Ware the ball in the post with space to operate. Kel'el Ware has nice touch around the rim. If he had 6'7" Kessler Edwards on his back with space to operate, he could have got you a few easy buckets late in that game. But they never went to it. And that's on Erik Spoelstra as well. Moving on to the third problem I have with Erik Spoelstra this season is the Terry Rozier minutes. I mean, we've been talking about it all season. If you look at the updated plus minus here, because we looked at this a few days ago as well, Terry Rozier has the second worst plus minus on this team by far. You can see here right before him, you have Haywood Highsmith at a minus 44. And then there's a huge drop off to Terry Rozier, who's a minus 113 after Haywood Highsmith. And then after Terry Rozier, you have Jaime Jaquez, who's also a major drop-off at negative 150. But I don't want to blame Jaime Jaquez too much. He's a sophomore. There's a such thing as sophomore slumps. It's fine. He's not getting paid any money. But Terry Rozier, who's getting paid $20+ million to have the second worst plus minus on the team by far, that's pretty bad. And then for Erik Spoelstra to play him as many minutes as we're seeing, there's just no excuse for that. Especially when his replacement in a lot of these spots has the second best plus minus on the team, and Alec Burks. Alec Burks is a plus 55 this year compared to Terry Rozier's minus 133. And Terry Rozier's played like over 900 more minutes this year than Alec Burks. I can't explain it. Every time Alec Burks checks in, he's making plays, he's hitting shots, he's playing smart. He's playing smart. And Terry Rozier is jacking up fadeaways, missing layups, not finding Bam Adebayo inside. He's really not doing anything to benefit anybody out there. And to tie it back to Erik Spoelstra, he should not be playing this many minutes. And this season, Terry Rozier is averaging like 10 minutes per fourth quarter. How does that make any sense? A lot of these blown leads start in the beginning of that fourth quarter when Terry Rozier is the guy running that unit. Spo's been putting a lineup out there with no Tyler and no Bam to start the fourth quarter. You have Terry Rozier trying to run the offense, and he can't do it. He can't hit a shot. He can't play make. So now by the time Tyler or Bam check in, your 15-point lead is down to 4. And that just can't happen. Starting too many games with the fourth quarter with him, closing too many games with him for defensive possessions. There's just no excuse to play Terry Rozier as many minutes as he's been playing. And some people will say, oh, it's because he's getting paid a lot of money. Spo has to play him. Spo hasn't operated like that in the past. I'll have to go back to Tyler Johnson. They signed him for that 5-year or 4-year, $50 million deal, terrible contract. And he was bad. And they ended up not playing him. Duncan Robinson was getting DMPs last year. He's getting paid the same amount of money as Terry. And Spoelstra doesn't, and I like that about Spoelstra, is he doesn't play a guy just because they're getting paid a lot of money. But for some reason, he's been doing that this year with Terry Rozier, and I just can't understand it. I don't get it. Now, moving on to the final thing this year, which is my biggest problem with Erik Spoelstra this season. I'm going to narrow it down to that one game versus the Detroit Pistons where Erik Spoelstra called a timeout that he did not have and quite literally cost his team a game. The reason this game is my biggest problem with the Heat this season, well, there's a lot of reasons, or my biggest problem with Spo this season, and there is a lot of reasons, but it's because this is the only one that you can literally directly tie to Erik Spoelstra. Because all this other stuff, you could speculate, hey, maybe Spo takes out Terry and puts in Isaiah Stevens and they're worse. Or Spo's not out there missing shots, turning the ball over for these blown leads. Fine. But being the one to call a timeout when you know you have none, directly leading to the Pistons getting game-winning free throws and the ball back, that is definitely on you. There's no debate about that. That's why that's my biggest problem with Spo this season. And it was just in such a tough spot. It was in overtime after a hard-fought game in which Tyler Hero dropped 40 points, balling his ass off, had the go-ahead bucket late. It's a team that you're literally fighting for playoff position with. I think they're right above us now. So that game will probably be very critical when it comes to later in the season when determining if you're a playing team or not, or if you're the 8th seed or the 9th seed, which obviously is a big difference. It was just such a bad spot to do it in. And the thing with Erik Spoelstra is he's so monstrous when he calls his timeouts, running out onto the court, that he can't hide it. He tried to walk it back after that, but everyone saw it. I'll never forget that game versus the Bucks like 4 or 5 years ago where Spoelstra literally ran onto the court to call timeout because the refs didn't see it. And then the Heat ended up getting a steal, or the Bucks got a steal, and he was on the court in the middle of the play. Yeah, I think the Bucks got the steal. That's why they didn't honor Spoelstra's timeout. Meanwhile, Spo's on the middle of the court. There's the hilarious picture that came out of that. But he's just so monstrous with it, he couldn't hide it. Maybe if he had just did a little, timeout, whatever, the refs would have just let it go. They would have said, okay, he doesn't have timeouts, let it go. But they called it, as they should have. And even on that play to end the game, which ended the go-ahead bucket before that, or the bucket right before that, was the Jalen Duren dunk. Because you had a terrible defensive unit out there. Again, with these lineups, you had Terry Rozier in there to end the game. You had no size, which is why the Pistons' big men got a wide open dunk at the rim. You had no Khalil Ware. I see Drew Smith out there on the bench. So and I looked it up. This was a month before Drew Smith got injured, and he's on the bench. But you're playing Terry Rozier? Why? I don't understand. And then after the game, Erik Spoelstra was asked about it, and he was like, yeah, that's a mistake. That's on me. Well, duh. Thank you for taking accountability, but yeah, I mean, there's no excuse for that, though. There's no excuse for it. So, yeah, just to kind of recap here, my 4 biggest problems with Spoelstra this season is we have all of the blown leads, followed by the hesitancy to play Bam and Ware, or I guess just Ware in general, the Terry Rozier minutes, and then calling the timeout versus the Pistons. There's, I'm sure, a bunch of other problems with Spoelstra this season. I just tried to kind of narrow or broadly separate it into 4 categories. But I guess in general, it's just a lot of the lineups and the play calling. It hasn't been good at all, and there's no excuse for it. I can't make any sense of it whatsoever. But that being said, they need a strong second half of the season. Although they're 3 games under, because it's in the East, you're still only a handful of games back from that 6th spot. So hopefully they can go on a run. Hopefully they can integrate Wiggins and Davion Mitchell a little bit better, and those guys can kind of get comfortable here. And who knows, maybe they can go on a run. But that being said, make sure to leave all your thoughts down below. If you think I forgot to mention anything regarding Erik Spoelstra, make sure to comment it, because I'll be reading what everyone has to say. Like the video and subscribe, because all the support is greatly appreciated. And that being said, I'll see you on the next one. Peace out, everyone.
Look, pull up in your city, tryna get that dead face. Do it on my own, I don't need no dead weight. Had to kill him off, yeah, I need a head space. You know this homegrown bitch don't offend me.